Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining a webinar focused on resilient supply chain network. First and foremost, I hope everyone is healthy and doing great. We are streaming live, and we are going to talk about the challenges faced by current supply chain networks posed by COVID-19 and how technology can help you optimize your supply chain network in different scenarios. My name is Bhaumik Jain, and I will be leading the discussion today. I'm honored to be joined by my colleagues, Paul Van Naroop, who is Supply Chain Planning Specialist. Good afternoon, Paul.
Good afternoon and good morning to everyone. Very pleased to be with you today.
Thanks, Paul. And Anand Pandey, who is a supply chain analyst and consultant. Good afternoon, Anand.
Good afternoon, Bhaumik. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone else.
Thanks, Anand. As you all know that COVID-19 is causing real disruptions to today's supply chains. It has caused unprecedented need to make supply chain network more agile and efficient than ever. In today's discussion, Paul will be discussing key research findings about various network design practices and how optimization-based scenario analysis can help you make your network very efficient. It will be followed by a live demo of network design scenarios by Anand, which will bring into life some of the insights discussed by Paul. In case you would have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to type in your question in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll answer your questions during the Q&A session. Post-webinar, you will also receive a survey to provide us feedback and a link to the webinar recording. Now, before I hand over to Paul to start the discussion, I would like to briefly introduce AIMMS to you. In 2019, AIMMS celebrated 30 years of helping various industries around the world to optimize their supply chains with its scenario modeling and analytics-powered software. And today, we would like to share some of our experience and insights with you. With this, I would like to invite Paul to take the discussion forward.
Thank you, Bhaumik. So I thought before we get launched with the research results, it's maybe just talk a little bit about network design as a concept for those folks on the line that are not familiar with it. So when we're talking about network design here, we're talking about a systematic approach to looking at a few things. So essentially, there's really two. It's about footprint. So where do I place my facilities, my DCs, my warehouses, and my suppliers? And secondly, how do I optimally flow product through that network? And the reason we want to do network design is that many of the costs and efficiencies that we live with day to day are actually hard coded into our supply chains due to the original design. So it's about taking a step back and saying, how can we make some design changes in order to make our lives easier on a day-to-day business? So it's about strategic modeling. I think that's important point to make. So typical use cases are open-close decisions for DCs. About looking at which customers you service from which location. It's about balancing and making the trade-offs between cost and service level in your supply chain. A very good use case is after mergers and acquisitions to design the optimal synergies between two newly merged supply chains. But also looking at risk analysis. So taking a look into the future and saying, well, what if something happens? What would be the best way to mitigate that risk? So these use cases are very much strategic in nature, and network design essentially revolves around running multiple scenarios against your network, and these are all future what-if scenarios to try and understand what will happen if, without actually making those expensive capex decisions. So it's definitely not an executional system like a TMS where you're managing trucks and trips on a daily basis, or a routing and scheduling system. It's more about looking at flows and importantly designing business cases for making those investments in your supply chain network to gain you OpEx efficiencies as you go along. So let's talk a little bit about the research. What we did is we polled our network of supply chain professionals across the world just to get a sense of what they're doing currently in network design and what practices are being used out there. And those respondents come from across the world, as I said, so APAC, EMEA, North America, and Latin America, and also respondents from a range of verticals, so consumer goods all the way to manufacturing, telecoms, pharmaceuticals, etc. And the responses also come from a range of supply chain professionals, all the way from directors through manager levels to supply chain analysts. So really a nice cross section of views from around the world, and we're very happy to share those with you today. And we're going to group that into three sections: resilience. So why are you doing network design? And I'll explain a bit more about that as we go. And then agility, which talks to how fast can you respond. And thirdly, we'll talk about what's keeping you, what are the main barriers for your organization. So we're also going to make it a little bit interactive and ask your views from the people on the line as well, so that we can contextualize the people in the audience. What are you thinking? And then we'll share the results from our broader poll. And we're going to do that through a poll. And Bomi, can I ask you to launch that first poll for us? So the way these polls will work, you should see it on your screen, a box asking you questions. And we're really trying to understand from you, why do you do network design? And you can choose multiple options from these selections. So there's 5 up on the screen. And once you've clicked your answer, please click on the submit button. And then once we've collated those answers, we'll talk through the results. All right, Bomik, if there's a good selection of answers, can you share the answers of that poll? All right, so hopefully everybody is seeing the poll results right now, and what we're seeing there is that 74% of people on the line are saying that they use network design to balance cost and service level. There's a lot doing the traditional aspect of it, which is reduce cost. And we're seeing very fewer responses looking at things like future demand flex and future supply disruptions. And M&A is always a good good reason. So that's an interesting result, and thanks for those answers. So Bomik, if you close the results of the poll for everybody, let's see what your peers are saying out there. So when we ask these respondents on our survey, what are you doing? What would be your greatest benefit for doing network design? You'll see that a lot of the top 4 bars are really the more traditional reasons for doing network design. So it's about cost saving, it's about visibility and transparency, better decision making. But what's encouraging is that we see at the bottom there more and more people becoming a lot more proactive with network design, and rather reactive. So reactive here means let's look at what we're doing, can we make it better, what we were doing in the past. Proactive means, well, let's plan for a future that we're not sure about. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And there's a lot of examples out there, right? So the COVID crisis is the obvious one. We didn't really see that coming at the end of last year, but there's other examples like Brexit and the US-China trade war, where these things are building and building and building for some time, and actually give us some time to do some pre-active work. And then other disruptions like political disruptions, as we've seen in Hong Kong, and weather disruptions, which we're seeing more and more frequently. These are the kind of disruptions that we know are going to come, but we're not sure how they look yet. And scenario analysis is really a great way to plan for that from a design perspective using network design technology. So the second question we asked around this resilience topic is what describes a typical use? And again, the top 2 are the more traditional responses. So a lot of people doing it as a project when they see a need, or periodically when an event happens, like a merger and acquisition. But also nice to see at the bottom is people using it more on a tactical basis, and even as part of an ongoing decision support. So it sounds strange to do strategic modeling on an ongoing basis, but we definitely see a trend of people moving towards creating these centers of excellence for network design, and doing that on a more continuous basis. All right, so that spoke a little bit about resilience, and the reason we framed resilience around the "why are you doing it" question is to say, well, are you just looking at the past, or are you looking proactively at the future for events that are coming, but we don't know what they look like yet. And I guess the second key aspect of that is that once something happens, how quickly can you respond? COVID's a great example. So I'm going to ask Bomik to launch the next poll for us. All right, and there you can see the question: how quickly can you respond to a new disruption like COVID-19? Is it hours? Is it days? Is it weeks? Is it months? Or is it years? So let's give folks a couple of seconds to answer that question. Remember, please remember to hit the submit button once you've put in your answers. In this case, it's one answer only. All right, Bomik, if you want to display the answers of the poll for us, please. All right, so interesting amongst the audience is that most the biggest bar there is months. So people are telling us that when something happens, it takes months to react. Very few people doing that in hours and days. Fortunately, nobody's taking years to react. And that's very insightful, right? So if you put your mind in the frame of COVID, you know, in December we were all still enjoying Christmas. January was okay, but by February we knew something bad was coming. So if you start doing something about it in February, the lockdown starts in March. Month is really too long for that. The good news is, if you close those results, Bomik, then we'll take a look at the survey results. The good news is that you're not alone. So what we heard from our respondents to our survey is that certainly 25% are also taking months. Many people are getting to the level of where they can react in the space of weeks, but fewer and fewer are able to react in a matter of days and hours. And the question really is how long can you afford to take, right? So some of those examples like Brexit and trade wars, you've got some time to plan, but if a hurricane hits your DC, it's really a question of hours. If not days, if not hours, when you really want to get in the boardroom and start running some scenarios with the executive up on screen and deciding, all right, trouble has come, what do we do? So that response time becomes more and more important, and I think that's becoming more and more possible now with the technology that's out there. The second question we asked is how often do you assess your supply chain network for improvements? And again, this is all about speed. So if you look at the bottom two, that's more the traditional people that every few years they're doing it when they think it's necessary, or best case once a year. But and very few people in those top two buckets, weekly and monthly. And we really think that's you know, the way of the future in order to establish that capability in-house, and doing that on a continuous basis is something that companies should be striving for. What would they do all day? You might ask yourself. So if you're in a network design center of excellence and you say, well, you should be running these models weekly, monthly. I think there's quite a lot that can be done. So scenario planning around risks. So identify some risks in the organization, and then identify an expected case, a worst case, and a best case. Run those scenarios, discuss them with the organization, start making the contingency plans. And I also think the data element is an ongoing exercise in network design, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But there's always opportunities to improve the data that you're using in your models. And if you're doing this on a continuous basis, it makes it much easier. And then in terms of agility, we also asked, you know, how experienced is your company in terms of using network design? So a lot of people are advanced beginners and competent, and that's okay. Very few are proficient and expert, where if something happens within a day, you can have your team running those scenarios. You really need the proficiency and the expertise in-house to do that. So it's about having a capability that you can switch on very, very quickly, rather than having to first go and hire some consultants to do that work for you. All right, and then the last topic I want to touch on is the barriers. So if there's good reasons to be doing network design and you should be thinking about getting more agile with it, what's stopping you? So Bomik, could you launch the next question for us? Right, and we've listed 4 here, and you can select more than one as well. So if you look at those key barriers, it's lack of skills. We don't know how to do it. Data, we don't have the data to do it. Technology, we've got Excel, but nothing else. And organizational, so people in my organization don't understand what we're trying to do with that. So please go ahead and select some of those, one or more of those answers, and then we'll give folks a few seconds just to do that before we bring up the answers. All right, thanks, Bomik. So Bomik has shared the results, and the highlight there from the audience is, well, we don't have the right technology to do that, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But the other barriers are also pretty high on the list, and in our minds, these are really the 4 key barriers to stop people from doing network design. And let's talk about each of those in the context of the research results. All right, so the first question we asked our respondents is, who does network optimization in your business? And the reason we asked this is just to understand the skills barrier here. So the specialist modelers, for a long time, it's been the network design has really been the domain of people who've got very sharp skills on certain pieces of software. But there is quite a big dependency there, right? So if that one person that knows how to use it leaves, there's trouble. IT's got really a different focus, so we don't see network modeling being done out of IT departments. And we also feel it's quite unreasonable to expect operational staff who are running the supply chain on a day-to-day basis to sit back and take a look at design from a more strategic approach. So very gratifying here is that 65% of the responders are saying, no, we do this with our supply chain. It's the supply chain team members that are running these studies and running these models. So it's entrenched in the supply chain department. And the last option, of course, is external consultants, but that's more if you're still in the frame of doing network design as a one-off study rather than entrenching a capability. The second big barrier is data. So we asked our respondents, well, where do you get this data from? And most people are putting it from spreadsheets. And I think spreadsheets have a role to play in network design, because if you really think about it, you're running scenarios for the future, for a future state that doesn't exist yet. So all of these what ifs, ask you to get creative about data, about costs for future locations that don't even exist yet. But there's also data in your system. So typically base case demand and demand forecast from your ERPs. That's stuff that you want to be tied into automatically. So we would suggest that the best place to be is there at the bottom, and 30% of our respondents are there, where they're bringing in data from a variety of sources. The ERPs, yes, but also spreadsheets and also data that's held in the minds of some people in the organization. So important point about data is that we also have the luxury with network design that we can take some shortcuts and simplifications with data. So it's not like an executional system where you need to be very exact about the data and very precise. With network design, it's more about modeling aggregate flows and making some assumptions about cost. So there are some great shortcuts you can take on the data side to eliminate this as a barrier. Start quickly with what you've got, and then move on to a space where you're sharpening up just the data that you need to make effective decisions. And then the last barrier we talk about is technology. And what we see is that most people are still using spreadsheets. So when we polled our respondents, 60% are using spreadsheets. Still the most successful supply chain planning tool in the world, but it has its limits, right? So spreadsheets get big and clunky and difficult to run scenarios, and they also don't have the algorithmic capability that proper network design software has. And we would recommend that those bottom two bars are where you want to be. So specialized network design software, and preferably software with embedded analytics, so that you really get the power of the solve, but are still able to use it really easily. All right, I want to end the section on the research there, and thanks for your participation. So what we're going to do is launch our last poll question. And Bomek, if you launch that poll so long, I'm going to stop sharing so that Anand can tee up his demo of the technology. And the questions we're asking is, what is the most relevant scenarios that you would like to explore in your business? And there's 4 choices up on the screen there. And you can select more than one if you want to. But let's give a couple of seconds for you to answer that question, and then when the answers come up, I'm going to hand over the torch to Anand to show us some technology examples of how you would use technology to address these questions.
All right, thanks a lot, Paul. And thank you everyone for your results. It's quite clear looking at the results that there is a spread of possible scenarios that are relevant for businesses to consider, especially when it comes to evaluating demand fluctuations and future uncertainties. So what happens if our demand flexes up or down in the future? But more specifically, when it comes to enforcing strict lead time or service level constraints. And in there, we also have the ability to determine best locations for new facilities and also to get the best flow through our different resources and figure out what's the ideal mix of resources. But the true reason for the poll is really to stress that in order to be truly resilient and to deal with situations like COVID right now as a supply chain network, there are a multitude of different scenarios that should be considered hand in hand, because often they can have implications on the rest of our network that might not be visible right away. So how can we leverage technology to run these scenarios and be resilient? As Paul mentioned, network design is really about the systematic approach to deciding the optimal size, location, and flows in our network. So in my demo, I'll try to show you that systematic approach that is needed in order to evaluate such scenarios. And I hope in that you'll also be able to see how these scenarios can be proactively explored in an agile manner, and how it often leads to us exposing different hidden risks and opportunities, and finally get to the best overall result. My presentation will be based around a fictional Indian cement company, as you see the geography in front of you in the map, that creates 2 types of products, bag and bulk cement products, with various SKUs in those groupings. Some of these products could require high service levels with strict lead time constraints, but other might not have the same lead time constraints, but do create the need to cover a larger geographical area. You'll see there are 5 plants in the blue nodes, spread east, west, north, south, and centrally. 10 large depots in red, and in yellow you will see 20 warehouses with customers spread across India. I've already run the base case for us, which, as we heard before, is the reflection of the true current flows that took place in the business, so that 1, we can validate our costs, but more importantly, so that we can compare future scenarios against it to see what's really improved and what's become worse for the business. So we can first of all get this overall view in the flows page, where we can start looking at, for instance, where our suppliers and depots are and what's the primary transportation between them. So in this case, it leads to a total primary transportation cost of 40,000 lakhs in this case, also 403 crores. So the units can definitely be reflected to match the needs of the business. We can have a look at the warehouses on the network and the inter-resource transportation between the depots and warehouses, which leads to a certain cost. And finally, the secondary transportation to all of our unique customers. One of the barriers that we saw before in using technology is that it's often hard-coded, which removes the flexibility in bringing changes to this design. Here, everything is completely input dependent, meaning that just by tweaking the input data a little bit, we can reflect any type of supply chain that's needed. So what does that mean functionally? We could have different modes of transportation: rail, road, ocean, air. Those can be dynamically added to the model, and those specific flows can be explored. Different product groupings. So in this case, we see OPC and PPCs, both for bags and bulks. Those can be added. We can specifically look at certain of these groupings in a siloed way as well, and optimize for only some of those groupings as well. So it really brings that agility that's needed to bring about actual changes in the network. So based on the poll, we saw one of the options was, one of the higher options was evaluating demand fluctuations. So let's have a look to see how that can be achieved in the app itself. As mentioned, it's very important to consider future uncertainties in our network and prepare for them adequately. And that could be in the form of an increase or decrease in demand, could be a change in behavior of our resources, some transportation lanes being closed. But in this case, let's have a look at a potential increase in demand that could happen. For instance, for a cement company, there could be many construction projects in the pipeline happening in the near future to enable a quick economic recovery, which could then cause a surge in demand for a company such as this, which they must prepare for. Let's say the impact of that is that the bulk products for all of their distributor customers, as you could see highlighted now, will experience an increased demand of 20%. So with that change being now initialized, we can actually turn this into a scenario. Let's see how we can do that. In order to run a scenario, what we need is access to all of the levers that constitute a specific scenario. This is the control panel of the application that gives you access to those levers and switches. We can see that there is the ability to force certain locations in our network to remain open or remain closed. The ability to pick a certain amount, a minimum and a maximum amount of warehouses to have in our network, saying minimum and maximum is 30 forces our optimization to exactly choose 30 networks, 30 resources in our final solution. Knowing that this network has 10 depots and 20 warehouses, we are still kind of looking at the base case and sticking to our existing resources. On top of that, we also have the ability to relax and enforce different constraints that I will go through in a second. But let me start optimizing this new base case with an adjusted demand in mind. Now, as you could see, two of the constraints have been relaxed right now. So our lead time constraint and single sourcing constraint, the model has the ability to go over the limits that we have currently decided. Now let's see what the impact of running this scenario was. We can clearly see that whereas our base demand, as we saw before, was 5,130 crores, it is now driven up to 5,260 crores. And that cost is happening proportionately spread across our DC variable costs, supplier cost, and all of our different transportation costs. Now, as mentioned before, the implications aren't just on our overall cost. Each of the different elements in our network actually feel the rippling impact of such a change. For instance, our customers we can see which of the customers are supplying from which of the resources. In this case, we can see the city Lucknow is getting its products from Agra, and we can see the drive time distribution that this specific scenario leads to. In this case, 44 customers are serviced between 3 to 4 hours, and a few customers are served after 10 hours, which is actually a lead time constraint for us. Also good to mention that at any point in time, these detailed results that includes, which customers are actually within a certain limit can be exported as a CSV file and used for any further data manipulation or comparisons. Now, another key element is having a look at our cost to serve report. So we can see, for instance, the customer Jaipur has a per unit cost of about 0.03 for PPC bags, which is constituted 47% by supply cost, 13% by inter-resource cost, and so on. So we get a nice cost to serve report, and dynamically, by clicking on the product, we get to see which is the resource that's supplying to this customer, what's the supplier that's supplying to the resource as well, and all of the different cost elements related to this. Alternatively, we can also have a look on a total demand basis. So whereas PPC bulk products has a low demand leading to a low total cost for this customer in Jaipur, OPC bags actually constitute most of the demand and hence most of the cost. So let's pause here for a brief second to think about another of the pull options, which was to figure out what's the optimal new locations for resources. What we have been looking at right now is the current network of this cement company, but it's a valid question to ask, what if our existing resources are not optimally placed? This is where the center of gravity application comes in. It's an application that works hand in hand with the network design application that we were looking at before. What this application does is uses a demand, supply, or location pull in order to figure out what's the best new location for a resource. In this case, we can see that there are certain geographies, in this case, places like Mumbai and Bangalore that have quite a high demand density. So naturally, the inclination of the calculation would be to pull new resources towards these locations. So let's have a look at how we can use that information to generate new solutions for us. What I will do is run a 30 center of gravity location scenario. The reason I'm running 30 locations is because I know our existing resource has 30 locations. Our existing network has 30 resources as well. So by superimposing our current resource on top of the network that has been suggested by the center of gravity app, we can quickly start figuring out how it differs from the optimal solution, let's say. In this case, we can say Jodhpur is a potential candidate location for us to build a warehouse or a depot in, based on the demand pull coming from all the locations. However, in our real network, we have a warehouse in Udaipur, which is quite far away. So the idea becomes we can use all of these center of gravity locations, bring them into network design, enable the mixed integer programming capabilities of network design, and let it figure out if these new locations are actually more optimal for us. An alternate question that can be asked, by the way, is if we need to supply all of our customers, and I'm mentioning this because I noticed this was another big poll question. What if all of our customers need to be serviced within a certain drive time, let's say maybe 4 hours? How many center of gravity locations do we need, and where should they be placed in order to make sure they're all satisfied? So let's go back to network design now. some of you might have already noticed that we had 4 center of gravity locations already brought into network design, but so far they were forced to remain closed. Now I will force them, or I will enable them to be chosen in the optimization. I'll also allow the model to free range to pick between 0 and 34 warehouses, so the optimal amount. We call it blue sky analysis. Now at the same time, I'll also relax our DC constraints and our supply constraints, meaning that the optimization has the ability to go over the limits that we have set so far. Another thing important to mention is that there is complex mathematical analytics happening in the back end hosted on the cloud with being solved by Cplex servers. But all of that complex analytics is hidden in the back end. And what's brought to life here is just a user-friendly experience for the supply chain professional. Let's have a quick look at what the impact of that was. So a significant decrease in total cost from 513 to 493 here. And we can also see that most of that reduction is actually coming from a decrease in our fixed costs, meaning a lot of our resources must have been closed in this solution. Which one specifically? We can look in our DC results that a lot of the locations have been chosen to be closed in black. Some are now over capacity because that constraint was relaxed, and some are running under or at capacity. What's also interesting is that 3 of our center of gravity locations in Rajkot, Varanasi, and Vijayawada are actually chosen as optimal locations for us. And a lot of the existing resources have actually been forced to be closed down. Also on the supplier end, we can see how the utilization of different suppliers on a product basis has evolved in this particular scenario. Now, let's say we have run multiple different scenarios and we really want to evaluate which one of them are the best for us. There's often not simply one answer to that question. It requires us diving into the pros and cons of each scenario, which is what we can look at in this executive comparison page. The way to infer this is if we think about our supply cost and we think about our modified base case scenario where we increase the demand, in the closed location scenario, our supply cost is more expensive as compared to this scenario. And in our supply relaxed scenario, the supply cost is cheaper. And we quickly get a nice visualization, both in the bar chart and in this table, of really where certain scenarios come to the forefront and where they fall behind. Another way of comparing them is to look on a resource basis, how the behavior has changed between 2 scenarios. Where in one scenario, a DC or a depot in this case has chosen to be closed, whereas it was open in the previous scenario. And also from a cost to serve report, whether a certain customer is cheaper for us to serve in a certain scenario as compared to the other, and which customers are now actually more expensive for us to serve. So if there are some geographical regions that are important for us to always service, then it might make sense to choose a scenario where that region's cost to serve is the lowest. And finally, another essential thing to consider is what happens when our demand explodes, let's say by 5% in year 1, 20% in year 3, or alternatively, what happens if it significantly reduces. And we can get to different solutions, such as the depot in Hyderabad going from 100% utilization to 179 as demand goes up by 10% for our network, really showing a strategic importance for this location. Now, just to summarize everything we have seen, the app has, hopefully you've seen that the app has enabled us to be proactive, to prepare now, but also to prepare for the next time that a crisis could occur. The high barrier issue has been resolved, as you don't need an expert in modeling anymore to come to these decisions. The complex math is hidden in the back end, and the user experience for the supply chain professionals is at the front, which also lends itself to making decisions within hours and not within months, as we saw in the poll result. Finally, the reliance on spreadsheets, which can easily be overwhelmed by a growing business, can also be significantly reduced. And with that, I think we are done with the demo, and I'd like to switch it back to you, Bhumik.
Thanks, Paul and Anand. I would like to thank the audience for joining us for this webinar. I hope that last 45 minutes provided you good insights about network design. In case you would have more discussion points and questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And with that, I wish you all great rest of the week. Please stay safe and healthy. And thank you once again for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day further.
Okay, everyone.